Thanks for staying with us here on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. Let's get into some of the other top stories that we are following this evening. Want to put up some video here there for you of the actress Blake Lively. Of course, that's her husband, Ryan Reynolds, standing right beside her. But the latest news there as it pertains to this couple, the It Ends With Us drama keeps going. Blake Lively has now been sued by a crisis PR firm claiming that she launched a digital army against her. This all happens there in that It Ends With Us complaint. Blake Lively is currently has a lawsuit filed against her co-star, actor Justin Baldoni, accusing him of sexual harassment. This all came out initially in a groundbreaking article through the New York Times, where all of the allegations were pushed out and several lawsuits have been filed out in retaliation on the back end. Do want to now bring into the conversation now Neama Rahmani, legal analyst. Neama, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now. This case has just gotten more and more complicated. The stories and ensuing other filings have happened in the weeks since this initially came out. First of all, for those who aren't tapped into how this initially started, can you talk about Blake Lively and that initial lawsuit that she filed against her It Ends With Us co-star?
Yes, Christina, I'll start with the procedural timeline and then we can get into some of the specifics. So the first thing that happened was Blake Lively filed a complaint with the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. That's California's equivalent of the EEOC. So they're the ones that investigate and handle complaints when they relate to California state law as opposed to federal law. And this is really a precursor for filing a lawsuit. Normally what you have to do is you have to file your complaint and then you get what's called a right to sue letter, which allows you to file your lawsuit. So the first thing Blake Lively did was file that complaint with the DFEH. And then the New York Times published an article talking about the allegations against Justin Baldoni, really serious sexual harassment allegations. And that's how everyone became aware of this case. Then, of course, Lively's team filed a lawsuit against Justin Baldoni. So this is what Baldoni and his team did in response. The first thing they did was they filed a defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. So that was the first lawsuit that Baldoni's team filed. Then sometime later, in California, they filed a lawsuit against Blake Lively, alleging defamation here in California. And of course, recently, Baldoni's PR team filed their own lawsuit against Blake Lively because the allegations Blake Lively made weren't just sexual harassment. They said that Baldoni really affected a smear campaign against her to involve people on social media to plant bad stories about her, say terrible things about her. So that was part and parcel of her original complaint against Baldoni and his PR company.
And it is just like you said, taking so many twists and turns. We have the headline there from TMZ. So the latest thing, again, that we want to focus on now is what has come out in response, the latest information this week. Jed Wallace and his company Street Relations did file this $7 million lawsuit in federal court there in Texas. He says he had nothing to do with the campaign to harm Lively's reputation, as she is alleging in her court filing. Wallace, though, is not among some of those defendants, but of course, name was mentioned. As it pertains to this, is this something that you would have expected this PR firm, after they've been mentioned in a legal complaint, to then turn around and file their own complaint or defamation lawsuit?
Not necessarily, for a couple of reasons. One, what's in a legal complaint is protected by the litigation privilege. You can't necessarily sue for that. But this case has gotten so much attention that I'm not surprised we're seeing lawsuits filed in multiple states. Now we have New York, we have California, and we have Texas, because all eyes are on this. And I think maybe Lively and her team, her publicist, maybe even her husband, Ryan Reynolds, I think they underestimated Justin Baldoni's resolve, and maybe they thought that by filing this complaint and the New York Times publishing the story, it would really send him a message and he would back off. But he's done the opposite. He's dug in his heels, and him and his lawyer, Brian Friedman, they've actually done a pretty masterful job of combating Lively's allegations. So let's talk about what happened substantively. When this New York Times article came out, and it was a bombshell, Baldoni was dropped by his agents at William Morris Agency. He had a women's advocacy award that was rescinded he was one step from being canceled here in Hollywood, where I live. But he did a good job fighting back, and his lawyer actually started providing information to the public and the media. So when the New York Times published their story, they relied on text messages between Baldoni and Lively. And what Baldoni's lawyer said is that the New York Times and Lively cherry picked the messages. They weren't really getting the full sense of the relationship between these two and the banter that they had. And they also took it one step further. Not only did they provide the text messages, the full text messages, they released two key pieces of evidence, Christina. The first was an unedited video, or what appears to be an unedited video, of the rooftop dancing scene. That was a big issue for Lively. She argued that Baldoni really crossed the line there and was intimate with her in a way that she was not comfortable with. And they also provided a voicemail message that Baldoni sent to Lively, a voice recording. And it was a long voice recording. Everyone can listen to it. It lasts several minutes, where Baldoni's really apologizing to Lively for his actions. And I think that was important for a couple of reasons. One, it shows that he was really apologetic, but it supports Baldoni's argument. And this is his primary defense here. He is arguing that Blake Lively fabricated these sexual harassment allegations because she wanted creative control of the film It Ends With Us. And she also wanted to restore her own tarnished reputation. So that voice recording does appear to support that argument in part.
And Neema, as we've mentioned this, let's talk about the lawsuit specifically that Baldoni filed against both Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, their co-stars. It's for $400 million in damages. And we just heard you talk about some of the things that affected Baldoni's career as a result of this initial lawsuit. Ultimately, is there anybody who's going to come out of this cleanly? Because it seems like this is affecting all of their careers.
I don't think so, Christina. And people are talking about the $400 million. What I tell them is, it really doesn't matter what you ask for in a lawsuit. What matters is what you ask for when you're before that jury during closing arguments. So they can ask for $400 million. They can ask for $4 billion at trial. They can ask for $4 million. It doesn't really matter. That's not going to prejudice them or hold them back or really affect what the final ask is one way or another, because damages have to be proven by trial by the parties and the experts in this case. I think this case will likely go to trial, or certainly has a much higher likelihood to go to trial, for this very important reason. This case isn't necessarily about the courtroom, Christina. It is about the court of public opinion. Baldoni is fighting to save his career. It really reminds me a lot of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Depp, of course, was canceled, suffered a pretty bad verdict in a trial in Europe, and came here to the United States, to Virginia, and he sued Amber Heard for defamation to clear his name. And I think that's what's happening here. I don't think Blake Lively, and certainly Ryan Reynolds, they don't need money from Justin Baldoni. They're A-list celebrities, and they're worth a lot. And same thing, I think Justin Baldoni, obviously money is going to be more important to him, but he's fighting for his survival right now. If you have a reputation in Hollywood as being a harasser, that's a quick way to never make another film here again. So this might be one of those cases that goes to trial, not necessarily about the money that they're asking for, but they want to win in the PR battle, Christina.
And it's so interesting, Neema, as you mentioned there, so much of this court case, it surrounds around what happened online as well. But we're taking a look at this tweet and post there from TMZ. Another A-lister whose name has also been brought into the ropes, Taylor Swift. She was named in for that complaint. She's one of Blake Lively's friends. How do you think that this will affect this moving forward? Of course, Taylor Swift, the newest report is that she's unhappy with the fact that she was named or tied to this at all, because if there's one thing about Taylor, she cares about that reputation. So much of this case is tied to that. So what are your thoughts on Taylor Swift being named? Could we potentially even hear from her? Could she be subpoenaed as well?
She absolutely can be subpoenaed, and this is why. There was an important conversation that happened in Lively and Reynolds' New York penthouse, and an unnamed A-list celebrity was present, and many folks believe that that was indeed Taylor Swift, where there was this discussion of making changes to the script, and it really kind of supports Baldoni's argument that Lively was just upset about creative control. And apparently this celebrity, which appears to be Swift, did suggest that maybe Lively's suggestions were indeed good suggestions, changes to the script that, of course, Baldoni was producing in his role there. So there's a lot of back and forth about that. Now, if you're Taylor Swift, the last thing you want to do is have anything to do with this case. You don't want to be subpoenaed into court. You don't want to testify because this is nasty. And as someone who has represented a lot of celebrities, but probably sued more celebrities, the last thing Taylor Swift wants is to be dragged into this mess because it is going to be long. It is going to be scorched earth. And like you said, Christian, I don't think anyone comes out looking good if and when this case goes to trial.
All right, my last question for you, Neama, has to do with the author Colleen Hoover. Of course, It Ends With Us is her book. It was turned into a film adaptation. All of this drama was going down at the same time. Both of those actors were supposed to be promoting the film. If this film did not perform up to the level, we do know that it did nearly get $150 million domestically, so it did decently well. But do you even see that playing a part in this? Could she sue to say that their drama affected the outcome of the film? I'm just curious about that. So many people are speculating about that online.
Well, everyone's being dragged into this. Now, Hoover came out initially and did support Lively. A lot of folks did in Hollywood. And that's why people like myself thought that maybe this is going to end badly for him. No pun intended, that being the name of the movie. But I think the tide has really shifted. If, you survey people who are watching, I wouldn't be surprised if 80% or more are now Team Baldoni because of all the evidence that his lawyers have pretty effectively put out there. So again, here's someone that came out pretty forcefully in support of Lively initially. Haven't heard much from Hoover recently. I think anyone that was even on the periphery, again, probably wants out. But you do raise an important point about witnesses. This isn't something that happened behind closed doors. There are a lot of people that are involved in producing movies and directing them, right? A lot of this is caught on film. So we know that people can lie, but we have a lot of independent witnesses. We have a lot of video evidence. I think that's all going to come out. And I think the jurors and the public are going to be able to decide for themselves, was this really harassment or was this something else?
And we do have to wait for the official jury, if this goes to trial, to make that decision, not just the court of public opinion. But again, legal analyst Neama Rahmani here to help us break down the very latest as it pertains to these very complicated cases that are sort of tied together over It Ends With Us in the production. Thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now.